Now on PG Podcast Network, it's time for the Year-Round Carnival with Vince Accardi and your host, Racetrack Ralphie.
G'day, thanks for tuning in to the Year-Round Carnival podcast, where each and every Monday, Vince Accardi from Daily Sexuals and I have a good look at the best racing from Melbourne and Sydney, except, of course, when they're having Group 1 races in other states. It's a pretty quiet time of year at the moment, but always a good time to tune in our fundamentals. Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Ralphie. How are we?
Yeah, real well. Hey, this winter stakes meeting at Rose Hill was probably the main race, as well as the decent racing at Flemington, which we'll go through race by race. What about this? 3 years ago in the winter stakes, there was Gold Trip and Durston came through this race. The Caulfield Melbourne Cup winners are 3 months later. So who knows where we can find a little nugget. How did Rose Hill play?
Rose Hill, yes. Well, I felt it did very, very well overall, Ralphie. Like, it was only margin. You can classify it a genuine G4. You know, I don't really feel it was hard in the S5. Okay, that first section to the 800, a little bit closer to the reality of an S5, but the rest of the track, I would have to say it was like definitely in the middle of S5 and G4. And even when we look at the sort of lane biases on the day, all the performers pretty much came from, there was a couple of horses just inside what I would consider just inside lane 5, but the majority of them pretty much all landed in the 6 to 10 range.
I'll ask just one thing about race one with Without Peer hitting the line well. It looked nice to the eye. The overall time was much softer than two of the other 1,200 races on the day. What do you make from it from just as a 2-year-old perspective?
To me, it showed excellent, structure for longer distance. The way the horse settled, it's definitely, well, I shouldn't say it's not a horse that's a speed horse, because here we are, we've won at 1,200 metres, but the reality is the way it just ran through the rhythm, 5.3 lengths below benchmark versus the lead speed around -1.5, just really relaxed. There wasn't a lot of pressure in the middle of the race though, so this probably brought about the times being a little bit softer overall. They only moved a couple of lengths between the 8 and the 4, and then there was a good sprint home. We broke benchmark last time, but this is a horse that I feel is going to be much better over more ground.
We'll skip down to race 5, where Yoshinobu first started as a gelding. He didn't come up last prep, but as you wrote in your race speed profiles, this horse had a pretty serious figure from last spring, when third to Schnitzland, who then went on to of course win the Group 1 Coolmore at Flemington. So now focused as a gelding, what type of performance did he do?
Well, this is definitely a horse that's got capability, and it's a matter of when were we going to see it. Again, through that first split time, 6.8 lengths below benchmark, I felt that the move between the 8 and the 4 was good. It was just over 5 lengths. Really strong last 400, 4.6 above. Overall score, -1.5, Ralphie. We're edging to... I'd say we're not far off what the horse did not last campaign, the campaign before in its second prep. We're trending to that sort of range. Maybe on a dry track we could see this horse getting back into that sort of +1 range or better.
Anything in the numbers to justify the disappointing run of Spywire that ran third in that race?
Ralphie, up the front was in a perfect spot. There was only half length between them. In the middle, again, nothing between them. The horses hit the line reasonable, but no big sprint. So, not sure why this horse has only been able to do that late. Did the ground conditions early affect it? Was it the second up run, Ralphie? There's a few things that we've got to consider, but one thing that we do know about this horse is, if you look at its historic profile, it's never had a big 400-metre sprint, so it could be more of a one-pace type runner.
That needs to be banged on the pace.
Yep.
Craig Williams style.
Yeah, that's exactly what it needs.
Race 6. Now, according to the market, this is the most disappointing runner of the day was Tuileries, that ran fourth as odds on, with obviously big expectations. Nice trial leading in, had a bit of a boom on it from its first up and second up win last December. Vince, on the numbers, did it get every chance?
Well, have a look, Ralphie. The leader's going 10.8. This horse is going 16 lengths below benchmark. I mean, what the
Is it a
hell's
stay
going on?
race? No, let me
Yeah.
just check. No, it's 1200.
Yeah, 1200. It was like they thought, okay, we just dawdle out. It's a barrier trial. The horse did have some aggressive moves in the middle, which it needed to, right? I mean, okay, only a couple of lengths off the actual winner in terms of that first section, but then I don't know how much more the horse could have put down over that last 400 on the setup, 7.2 lengths above. And this is the classic case of the closer the better.
Yeah, and so like I like chatting about some of the fundamentals here in your work here, Vince. At this time of year when we haven't got the pressure of the good races, it's got to be underlined that a 14 length squeeze in a sprint race is very rare to be seen.
Yeah, and it's big, Ralphie. It's huge to do that. And we've got to also remember the horse is first up. Even though it's had a trial, it's not going to taste that sort of medicine. And it would. I'm not going to say it was done. I just felt that the horse ran optimum late. If it was 2 lengths closer, 3 lengths closer, maybe a length off the lead, it'd be a completely different outcome. The price would have been justified.
Yeah, well, it's a forgivable setup, and I dare say it'll be pretty short price next start as well, and hopefully winning. Race 7 on the program here. Look, this is a race we spent, as in the lead-in form, we spent a bit of time on this a couple of weeks ago, that the race that Good Banter and Cormac T came through, Prayer Sparrow was in there as well. And one of the problems was we said there was such a brutal pace. These could be some flat runs coming out of this. And the big dynamic, always Vince, again, talking about fundamentals, you don't want to go fast race to fast race.
Yeah, and this is what we had, didn't we? Here they are, 2,400 metres. They're probably making a mockery of sprint races, going plus 5.4, really putting plenty of pressure. I actually felt the entire structure of the race, the way they held on, even between the middle and the 8, was pretty admirable, realistically speaking, because I just would have felt that there would have been a complete collapse either in the middle or the last 400. And yet, with the exception of the last 2 horses, and in particular the last horse, because it went like ridiculous, plus 5.4, they were the only 2 that I felt collapsed, either in the last 400 or both the last 4 and 8. The rest of the structure of the race was pretty solid and real staying capability shown by a whole bunch of them.
So even though modest IVR figures, this is the type of race, particularly if, let's say, next start over 2,400, they get a soft tempo, it could be a coiled spring setup.
It'd be massive reversal for some runners.
Not bad figures here in race 8, won by Romeo's Choice, who just ducked up on the inside of Storm the Ramparts.
Inside the top 10, Ralphie, 0.4 above, 4th best of the day. Again, through that first section, minus 5.7, a little bit softer than I would say perfect, but definitely in terms of position in running, it's realistically, you wouldn't have wanted to be any further back than that. But the move in the middle was pretty solid. It was almost an 8-length squeeze, Ralphie, between the 8 and the 4, and I love the way the horse, Romeo's Choice, really was strong over the last 400, plus 3.3. In some ways, you look at it and say it was the perfect ride, but the perfect ride would have been 1 length closer, horse wins by a bigger margin, and probably we'd get to see where the horse is really at. I'm saying this horse is trending more like a 1.5 horse.
Corniche was having its last run for the Cummings Yard that seizes up next week's the last of any of their horses. But who I'm not sure which trainer's getting this horse, but I think they'll be winning races with it off this first up run after 287 days away.
Oh, for sure. This is very, very strong. 6.7 lengths below benchmark early, and then you look at the last 400 metres plus 3.7. Not too far off what the winner did. Yes, there was the variation of a length early, but in the middle, it had to do a decent amount of work. And even, probably the last 200 metres is the strongest part of the performance of the horse, and obviously very fit going into the race.
The winner challenge won by Robusto, just over accredited. Robusto on our Sizzlers a couple of weeks ago. This is our Black Book product. Minus 0.9 lengths below benchmark, ranked 4th in the day. back on track, unlucky here and ready. Peaked last prep. He's first with Bjorn Baker, winning the $2 million Ingham Mile with 2 lengths above benchmark. He backed it up when second in Eagle Farmer Transatlantic with 1.8 late November, resumed with a gas out run in the Stradbroke, doing little, but here, minus 5.5 at the 800, minus 3 in the mid-race, minus 4.4 last 400. However, 200 increments showed a sharp 3.3 length slowdown between the 600 and 200 for a big 3.6 length rebound. Last 200 in isolation. He's okay on wet ground, but better drier. The winter challenge here in a fortnight looks ideal, and he won it, but narrowly. What did he do on the clock?
Yeah, Ralph, you summed that up beautifully, because this horse, that was probably one of the most important and vital insights in terms of being able to get the performance that it did on the weekend, especially if you then time what happened first up. That +4 above benchmark first section, first up over 1,400 metres, was part of that whole setup. And then we're in a much slower run race. The horses definitely felt that performance and really wound up superbly. And then you look at the variations just in the IVR data from minus 10.7 to minus 0.9. You know this horse is a genuine +1 to +2 horse. And the writing was on the wall off that second up run that we could potentially see this horse easily, breaking that barrier of benchmark and possibly testing the +1 range, third up. Not saying that's going to be the peak, but the trend was we're heading to a peak, and there it was, +1.1, Ralphie. Loved the fact of the way the horse travelled through the first section, 0.3 below benchmark. Even in the middle, Ralphie, I took this down as a slowdown between the 8 and the 4 of minus, going from minus 0.3 to minus 1.5, losing 1.5 lengths, and then smashing it out over the last 400 metres with a +2.5. And it made the race look a lot tighter than what it should have been because of that scenario with aggression in the middle, the slowing at a critical point, I felt, and then having to rebound.
So accredited's rock hard fit, but Saltcoats is a nice improvement second up. He didn't have the slowdown that you've explained, but what he has done is given himself a beautiful platform there and just a benchmark range performance to do what he did last prep, which was to win third up.
Yeah, I felt that horse there is definitely on the rise without question.
All right, and finish off for the last race. King of Russo, he's just in the zone, this horse.
Isn't he ever? Just sensational. Beautifully positioned early, going 2.2 lengths below benchmark. There was a good pace in the race, Ralphie, almost 3 lengths above benchmark to the 800 metre point. Then you look at King as Russo's move in the middle. It wasn't over the top, but it was there. It was from, 2.2 below to +0.9, around 3 lengths, half a second move in the middle. And that sort of left the door open for a decent finish, +3.1. And I didn't even know if that was everything, because it was just that subtle softening between the 4 and the 2. I'm clutching at straws, but I'm just looking to say, could this horse have run +1.5? Probably.
One of our great supporters will finish off with this as a share in War Eternal. What can you tell him about War Eternal with his first up run here after missing a year's racing?
I thought it had merit, Ralphie. First section, 2.5 lengths below benchmark, pretty much, right on, very similar pace to King of Russo. In the middle, I felt the horse was still holding its own. Just the dip between the 4 and the 2 and being fresh of 1.9. I'm clutching at straws with King of Russo 0.3, but this was a 1.9 length dip, and then there was a rebound of +1. So I felt that there was unfair in terms of where it finished, because if you would remark that section between the 4 and the 2, this horse would have been more like a -2, and that would have had you like on the edge of like running fourth.
Well, he's an absolute duck, so if they can get a bit of rain coming forward, that's a nice little encouraging run. Flemington, Vince, Flemington always plays perfectly because the bloke's an absolute master at doing it, but there's one thing he can't control, and that's the headwind. So on your numbers, what type of impact did that headwind have, which it should be underlined for those who don't get it. It's a headwind on the turning circle races, but it's actually a tailwind up the straight.
Yeah, well, it was... If we sort of isolate a couple of the races, like this is the 1,800 metre race, and maybe to a lesser extent the mile, if you want to really zone in and say, okay, what's the rule variation? You were definitely confronted with around 4 lengths impact in headwind. And then if you look around and understand the tailwind variation, which was pretty clear for me, around 2.5 lengths, you could see overall impact plus minus probably affected the general runner around 3 lengths, and the variation was almost 7.
So in race 1, was that just a case that Blake Shin said, I just don't want to be in the headwind and I'll take my medicine with Just for Show, because he was pretty much out of play once he couldn't get across and decided to concede. Duchess in the zone, but they've walked. So for an odds-on horse that's around minus 3.4, was it a good performance, or was it maybe a sign that's saying, okay, it's a nice win, but maybe fifth run, first prep, it might be time for a little freshen?
Yeah, it couldn't have got it any better set up than what it did, Ralphie. Absolutely, because of the setup of the wind conditions, you just could not have done anything more. 10.1 lengths below benchmark, big surge in the middle, and not as much finish over the last 400 metres, but consistent. Again, if I sort of bring all the factors in, we still probably wouldn't have got anywhere near benchmark overall, because I would allow a couple of lengths, and that gets you still around 1.5 lengths below. Got the ideal setup, Ralphie. That's it.
A couple of world record slow races in the second stage. I might brush them, even though I think Alcora's got some staying upside, but we just can't see it until he gets into a fast race. Race 4, though, look, Shining Smile, he might be the best placed horse in Australia, this horse, because he's still yet to produce on the clock. But I do want to ask you about this Bold Secret. On debut, slow away, Willow just took the medicine, let him balance up. But even with the tailwind, that seemed like a pretty serious sprint late.
Yeah, the sprint was big, Ralphie, plus 7.2. And maybe this setup has come from the first 2 sections. Number one, obviously the wind, putting that big resistance in minus 7.2. Between the 8 and the 4, the entire field very controlled, not really making any moves, and we have left it for a big sprint home. And yes, this horse did demonstrate a superior sprint to any other runner in the field. So it could be argued that you're 1 length closer, you probably almost win. So the run's big into the future. We have to just put a little caveat around, like, are you going to produce that same sprint? Because it's unlikely you're going to get that same setup.
Race 6 in the program, we'll skip race 5. La Fracas, well, I'll tell you what, like, we don't worry about the stories from racing, but when you got Blake Shin versus Craig Williams riding for the title, gee, they're putting on some masterclasses, aren't they? Here's this La Fracas. If you watched Blake, from the time they opened, he said, I don't care that I'm John Barry 1, wherever I finish in the race, I'm not going to be ending up in lane 1, because he was just a master at just getting wider and wider and wider, and that was the difference between winning and losing, surely.
Absolutely. The wider you could get, the better, Ralphie, particularly up the straight. When you sort of look at the race and the breakdown, they've gone out reasonable, minus 2.8 through that first split time. La Fracas minus 8.7, Ralphie. I felt like two lengths too far back. And still, you look at the surge in the middle, no one could match the surge in the middle. It wasn't massive, but 7.7, where most horses were running at half that surge. And then, the big blistering last 400 metre finish, plus 6.3. Even if we allow and we factor some, insight to where you are on the track, still, that finish was so much superior to the competition.
So he was dominant in his lead-in, hence being favourite, but one of the things that we hadn't seen was what type of dry ground acceleration he could produce. So now we have, because those Sandown mornings and even his Kilmore win last prep were all on wet ground. So what did he show you that said that he's got some dry track capability as well?
Well, you look back at that Bendigo run last campaign, the plus 7.8 last 400 metres, and then even if you look at the combined last 8, it was almost 12 lengths above the benchmark combined. That was at Bendigo. So that gave you a little bit of an insight of what this horse's acceleration's like on clean ground. Now, that first section that day was like almost 10 lengths below benchmark, but if you then cast that onto what's happened here, not much of a difference in the first split time. Virtually minus 10 versus 8.7. And then you look at that last 400 metres, it was a 6.3. But if the setup of the race says to me that we've got several lengths still to come with this horse.
So Daniel's asked about a 1400 capability. Given that he relaxes, what's your confidence level there?
Why not? Absolutely. Yeah. No question at all.
Mormona won the Dean Lester race over 2,800 metres from Muktamil and Samuel Langhorne. I want to ask you this, Vince, because it's very rare we'll get an opportunity to see something like this of apples to apples. That Bold Souls come through. That was his fourth consecutive Flemington distance race. Yeah, over slightly shorter, but there were 4 distance races in a row. And I heard Patrick Payne race morning on I think it was RSN saying about how it was important to just get the horse to relax and get him settled, and that's from a master horseman's perspective. I'm not questioning that, but what I am saying is via the numbers, and you've got a tool that says ground made up. This is all positioning running poison, wasn't
it? Yeah, of course it has to be, no question.
So what's the difference in speed, early speed that he was producing compared to the lack of early speed on Saturday?
Well, of course, we still got to compare. How much are we going to allow for the conditions, right?
Yes.
We have to bring a little bit of that into play. Like, how much more would you allow is what I'm trying to say, right? Compared to what had actually taken place. Realistically, Ralphie, if I look at the setup and the structure of the race, first of all, this race was run with a lot of pace, even with the challenges of the winds. I mean, the leader's gone almost benchmark. The field speed average of the race is, I'll call it 6 lengths below. This is against a trend, probably 4 to 5 lengths faster than the trend of the day. So there's plenty of heat there, and even in the middle. The tenacity in the middle is like they're surging in the middle, Ralphie. And then we look at the close. The top 4 horses have all broken benchmark. For a 2,800 metre race overall, when I put the lens, without singling out any one horse, I felt the first 4 horses across the line have done a lot better than what really happened on the day.
Yeah. All right, race 8 again, and there's a nice little follow-up from Daniel. We're looking for extra distance. So, Saturday, Sadati, we've stamped him in Sizzler's last 2 starts, and he came in as favourite, but pretty backable favourite. He was very hard to put any queries on going into the race, and Craig Williams, just absolute masterclass, gave it every chance. What did he do on the clock, and what type of confidence would you have if they stepped him up in trip?
Well, first of all, overall, 0.8 below benchmark. Speed-wise, 9.5 lengths below benchmark. It was very similar to what it did at its previous start at Caulfield, a -7. So if you look at it from that structure, there wasn't too much difference. Even in the middle, Ralphie, again, putting the lens over versus the Caulfield run, Caulfield was -3.1 in the mid. Here was -2.5. Again, very, very similar. And then it was all about that last 400. What a difference in terms of ground acceleration made for this horse, that plus 3.9 last 400 metres, really appreciating that cleaner ground. And that was sort of, in some cases, a bit of a resemblance to what it did at Sandown off that 84-day break. That this horse really does like the dry grounds, and as the condition builds, you can start to see the sort of power this horse has, and I feel it can have a much bigger acceleration given the right sort of circumstances. Yeah, in other words, if you're on a track where you don't really have to worry about the wind and you're running on similar surface to what you did on the weekend, perhaps we could have seen, firstly, another 2 or 3 lengths better last 400 metre sprint, and its sustained pace would have been even stronger.
Reminds me of Allstate a couple of years ago. I can't think of off the top of my head, but they kept it at Flemington and ended up running 5th at the Melbourne Cup, the Mar team. So he's just got this on the rise feel about him. So let's see what he does do. This is just complete Monday quarterbacking style. What actually happened and how did it happen? A 200 to 1 shot nearly won it in Antrim. He loomed up. Now, couple of things. One, he was 200s into 100s officially, and he had 2 trials since, and he's had 2 preps now with Steve Richards, and who said when the stewards actually asked him about the improvement afterwards, he said he'd been working well and expected something. Here's a horse that did show talent as a 3-year-old at Moonee Valley in his first run and had a New Zealand profile that was okay. So he lost his way. But what can you tell us about his historical best compared to what he did on Sunday?
Yeah, I felt you're right about his lost his way, and just some of those races, like that Flemington run back in November last year, the horse going almost plus 10. That's such a fast pace, right? And the horse completely tanked out. Then they've given it a big break. So I only had the 2 runs that campaign. And then you look at this, they've turned up first up. Realistically, that horse in that race, even though it's ran 8th, you look at the first 2 sections, 2.1 below plus 5.5 in the middle. Then it goes to Swan Hill, has to increase the pace, maintain a solid speed between the 8 and the 4, virtually benchmark, completely collapsed over the last 400 metres. And then they go to Flemington, right? Now, this is all hindsight, right? I'm not sitting there myself saying to you, oh, yeah, you could definitely be keen on the horse, on the weekend, because I look at the final adjusted figures of recent times. But the setup again, plus 4.8 early, going fast, 0.8 between the 8 and the 400, another collapse. So in conditioning terms, wow, the horse was getting big conditioning build-up. And then what happens? It turns up here, and the horse is going almost 12 lengths below benchmark. You would say, off that, just what I talked about, going all the way back to Flemington in 24, the horse hadn't seen a soft tempo like that. In fact, the horse has never been able to relax that easily in a race. Of course, ground conditions impacting that, but then allowed to really demonstrate what this horse was able to do. And what it means is, number one, reflecting on what you said initially about what its capability is in terms of benchmark. This was no fluke run, and if the market dismisses it next start, they'll be making a big mistake.
Nice, because I'm just like, while you were saying that, I looked up. Flemington was blinkers again, so obviously, it had nothing in the tank there.
Yep.
But with two trials between runs to get out any flatness, it showed what it's capable of. So yeah, I see what you're saying here. And sometimes when a horse is big odds and runs well, the market does dismiss it next up, particularly in small stables. So might be a little present there. Last race, I just mentioned about Craig Williams. I mentioned about Blake Shin rather, but Craig Williams here, lose some, win more. Again, just the masterclass of putting the horse in the right spot, right position, and it gets there by an eyelash.
Yeah, and really pretty good performance by the horse. 3.9 lengths below benchmark. It's a sprint race up the straight. Got to benchmark the whole field's moving between the 8 and the 4, and it really then, in some aspects, there was a little bit of nutrition and about how gutsy you can be late, and there it is, plus 4.1 for this horse. Was able to outsprint them all. And when you look at those first 3 horses across the line, they're all very close to each other, yet they couldn't finish off the same way sprint-wise. Maybe did Willow win it between the 8 and the 4? Did he win the race there? Not having to overextend as much as the second and third horse.
And one thing, the fundamental to finish with, because the second horse was $12 and Big Me was $31, getting away from the wet ground. 1,000-metre horses, 1,000-metre races, isn't it?
Yep.
That is a fundamental, those short course specialists there. So hopefully the information helped and helped you going forward. If you're a member, the Group 1 members, I reckon I've found 3 that I really want to be with next start that are hidden runs. I'm going to ask Vince. And there was a super trial recently up in Sydney that I know Vince put the clock over, so I'm very keen to get his take there. So that'll be our Group 1 members bonus. If you want to become a member via my website, racetrackralphie.com.au. Horses like Via Sistina, well, once you say Via Sistina, everything else is this is a big deal, but Fangirl, Tom Kitten, Autumn Glow, Aliana, they're all set to trial this week. And what we're going to be doing through the spring, we're going to be pegging them as they come back, and that'll be a big talking point for our Group 1 members. So like I said, if you want to become a member via my website, racetrackralphie.com.au, support the fact we're independent, corporate bookmaker ad-free, and of course, all of Vince Cardi's work via dailysectionals.com.au. Thanks for tuning in to Year Round Carnival.